Yeah, so Minnesota has had its fair share of fraud headlines, whether it's the massive welfare scandal or the misuse of public funds that have come out, investigations that have basically embarrassed the entire state now on a national level. And now it looks like you may be able to add voter fraud to that list because you had a Minnesota state rep. She went digging, and what she found in one county alone was 3,000 voters that had some serious problems with their voting identity information. And it just happened to be in a county that Ilhan Omar represents. Go figure. All of that only adds to the debate on voter ID and why it's needed in every state. Because like we're learning now in similar places like a Fulton County in Georgia that now has fraud investigations taking place, these races can sometimes come down to the narrowest margins and affect the nation on a massive scale. And as always, if you enjoy the content, smash the thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know. And to stay locked in with future videos, subscribe to the channels. And you have to turn those notification bells on. I had a couple folks reaching out to me saying they haven't seen my videos in quite a while. Make sure you turn on your notification bells because YouTube can act kind of tricky with that sort of thing. But let's get right into it.
Now on to this. A state representative in Minnesota is raising exactly why election reform is needed. Republican Pam Altendorf is sharing her analysis of the active voter list in Hennepin County, where she says nearly 3,000 voters have missing information such as names, addresses, and birth dates. And she's also uncovering potential duplicate voters with matching names and addresses, but a birth date just a few years apart. Kind of curious. Well, Minnesota State Representative Pam Altendorf joins me now. Pam, tell me what you found on these voter rolls there in Hennepin County. That's just one county in Minnesota.
Absolutely. So just to give you a little background, I am the vice chair of the Elections Committee in the Minnesota State House. And I think it's very public knowledge that the DOJ was looking for voter rolls across the country to help clean up our voter rolls, which should be important to everyone. And Minnesota declined to do that. And after we were being sued, I looked at the state statute. I've been working with some election integrity groups like Minnesota Voters Alliance, my own staff, and the Minnesota State Statute is clear is that I have accessibility to this data. So I did a data request to 4 counties, and kind of the bigger story is that Steve Simon, the Secretary of State, is actively working to deny me, sitting state representative on the Elections Committee, the ability to even see the data rolls to determine if they're clean or not.
Now, the argument we keep hearing from the left is let the state handle it. Let state officials and election authorities do their job. Keep federal government out of it. That's how you're supposed to, supposedly protect election fraud. Okay, fine. But here's the problem. In Minnesota, you have that. You have a state representative doing exactly what Democrats say should be done. Reviewing voter data through official channels, asking questions about record integrity, and now there's resistance. There are counties denying access and officials pushing back. So which is it? Because if transparency is the goal, this sure is a funny way of showing it. And this is the broader debate playing out nationally. This is not just about Minnesota. It's about whether verification should be proactive versus reactive. And that takes me back to this clip of Abby Phillips on CNN recently, where I guess she thought she had this whole voter ID thing figured out. Take a listen.
Why can't we ask the government to do what they have the ability to do, which is to verify people's citizenship? Why is the onus on the person and not the government, who is the keeper of the records?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Look, if you have to show some proof and then the government can match it against the database,
yeah,
I'm fine with that.
Well,
I don't have a problem with that.
That's exactly how the system works right now.
Abby.
Right now, hold on.
Yeah.
Right now in the United States of America, this has been true for 25 years. When you're applying for a voter to register to vote, you have to produce either an ID or a social security number. The government is then
not in this state, not in New York.
The government. That's a federal law. That's a federal law. Every state, okay. When you're registering
to vote, you don't
need
need an ID here.
You
can give any.
So you
can any number.
Hold on, Joe.
You can give
Listen,
any.
When you register,
Listen, Joe.
I mean, when you
are registering
to register to vote the first time.
Saying. When you register
Initially.
to vote for the first time, you have to supply either an ID or a social security number. The government is the keeper of the records of who is eligible to vote and who is not, who is a citizen and who is not. They then keep a database, that's also part of the law, and they check against the database.
So yeah, when you have state officials who aren't able to do their job because they're being denied access, it only fuels the argument for voter ID. something Abby Phillips didn't understand. And it looks like Democrats are hiding something when there's a lack of cooperation and information is being suppressed. But these are the kind of things that happen behind closed doors a lot of times. And so everyday people really don't know or hear about this. But now that's also why this debate isn't going away, because people do know about it. With that being said, let's get back to the clip.
That's really curious. So why not just give you the voter rolls? I mean, most people, I think if you ask them, they would want sunlight. That is the best disinfectant. You want transparency. And I would just note this. Scott Pressler pointed out to me the 2008 election, he noted on this show, there in Minnesota, in your state, was decided by 312 votes. That was the Senate race. So this matters.
That's right, and we have many races that matter across the state, but after I did the data request of the 4 counties, 1 county did comply. And remember, this is after Steve Simon specifically put out a directive to all 87 counties telling them not to give me the active voter list. And for whatever reason, Hennepin County, the biggest county in Minnesota population-wise, which represents 20% of our population, did send me the data. And in that, and again, I'm just looking at a very high level view. There are tons of, there's missing information. There's situations that looks like it might be duplicate voters. There's a lot of voters over 100 years old that were born in 1926 or earlier. And the real question is, you know, Republicans and anyone who just cares about fair elections, why is there such an effort to block us or any election integrity group to see this information? If they're clean, that's great. And if not, if Steve Simon is unable or unwilling to clean our voter rolls, then we absolutely have to get federal help, because this is disenfranchising every legal voter in Minnesota.
Now, here's the thing. When you have a state like Minnesota expanding benefits to illegal immigrants, whether it's access to housing programs, healthcare coverage, welfare assistance, or even driver's licenses, yeah, people are going to ask questions. Now, Democrats will say that these policies are about humanitarian concerns or economic integration. That's their argument. But critics look at the actions and say the policies tell a different story. Because when those benefits that were traditionally reserved for citizens are extended more broadly, it only fuels the argument that the line between citizen and non-citizen are being blurred. And so let's jump into this next clip where a Minnesota state representative breaks down that very issue. Check it out.
And I also find it incredibly revealing, Representative, that when pressed on illegal immigration, he wants to make the point that is often made. They try to suggest it's not a crime, it's a civil infraction. But does that mean, therefore, you don't enforce the law on civil infractions? And of course, then he doesn't say that's the case. No, of course we do. But when it comes to illegal immigration, the answer is it depends.
Well, I don't know how you make the case that they're taking it seriously. Even, again, if you accept the premise, which is wrong, crossing the border is a crime. Staying past your time is a civil matter. But regardless of that, the idea that they're taking that seriously in the state of Minnesota, we just passed driver's licenses for all under a Democrat trifecta. We're giving driver's license to these people. We had to fight tooth and nail at the end of last year's legislative session to end Minnesota taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants. So you can't, on the one hand, say we're taking this problem seriously, civil infractions involving immigration should be enforced, and, oh, by the way, we're going to give you driver's licenses and health care and housing and access to all sorts of medical services and sign you up for welfare. Your actions speak louder than your words.
Yeah, so you heard that. Absolutely unbelievable when you think about what's happening in Minnesota right now. And here's the thing. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. It's not like voter fraud just magically never happens. It does. The problem is, once it happens, it's done. The vote is cast, the election is certified, and even if someone is later arrested or convicted, it doesn't necessarily undo the outcome. And that's what's so frustrating to a lot of people. Because what we often see isn't the system at the top being examined or reformed. It's an individual at the bottom being prosecuted. The easier target, the person you can point to and say, see, we handled it. But the larger question remains, how did it happen in the first place? What safeguards failed? And what is being done to prevent it from happening again? That's the conversation people want to have at this point. And so with that in mind, let's get into the next story because it highlights exactly that dynamic. Take a listen.
Allegations in a Minnesota voter fraud case that first came to light this summer. 2 people pleaded guilty in federal court to being paid to help register voters. In all, 500 to 600 fraudulent voter registration applications were submitted to election officials in offices in 13 Minnesota counties. Esme Murphy has been following this case, and she joins us now. Esme?
Hi there, Frank. It was some sharp election workers in Carver County who realized the names and addresses on the voter registration forms did not match with any county residents. Prosecutors charged 2 people with 1 count each of voter registration fraud. According to the charging documents, the 2 were paid by an unnamed foundation to help register voters. The 2 defendants pled guilty this summer and have since moved out of state. The scope of the 2-year FBI and state investigation was not previously known.
And it's very significant that they said today it was 13 counties, between 500 and 600 fake voter registrations. And that's just from 2 of the independent contractors that worked with this group.
The investigation involved scouring hundreds of records.
On guidance from the FBI, the voter registration applications were mailed directly to the election lead, and instructions were shared to use gloves when handling the forms.
In testimony before the committee, Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon says the system designed to catch voter fraud worked.
This is a case about individuals who conspired to submit false voter registration applications. This is not a case about fraudulent votes. And this is ultimately a case of the system working.
How many were in the system is challenged.
Republican Committee Chair Kristen Robbins, who is running for governor, says she has additional concerns that the unnamed foundation that paid the 2 workers is funded by state taxpayer dollars.
99% of their budget comes from state grants. So this is a group that the state is funding and that then went out and did these voter registrations.
Now, the hearing left a lot of people, including us, with a lot of questions that were not answered.
Yeah, so this is just a tiny sample when we really think about it, right? If this is happening in one county in Minnesota, what do you think is happening in places like a New York, a California? And if the only excuse Democrats can come up with for why voter ID laws nationwide are not needed is basically, just trust us. I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Maybe in the past that was fine, but new rules are needed because we see what Democrats are capable of when they don't get what they want. We see it currently happening with this administration and the lengths they're willing to go to. But that's the update and my thoughts. Now let me hear from you. Drop your comments down below. As always, smash the thumbs up button if you enjoyed the video. That's the best way to let me know. Subscribe to stay locked in with future videos. And as always, until next time.